Saintly Snapshots today. Hello, I'm Kendall Bryan Hunter, author of the book Consider My Servant Job, and this is Come Follow Me, Get to the Point, where I always show up, I always come prepared, we never take roll, and just bring your own refreshments. Recess, Easter's coming up, and so more junk food. So today, I think that went into the trash. I'll check it later once I'm done filming. So, saintly snapshots today. This will be a little bit different. I'm not going to get into the specifics, just talk about general observations. So, background stuff. What we're starting to read is historical sources that will see a snapshot from the life of Christ and then learn some principles from that. And so this is a little bit different from historical sources that, or I should say, different from a sermon where you're teaching principles or something like a pastoral letter when you read about in Paul's epistles in the New Testament. It's a practical application and a human illustration of Christ's teaching and his life, his character. So what happens as we read, there'll be the event, and then there'll be sort of an explanation that follows after the event. So there'll be a sort of a tension. Christ will do something, then the tension will get resolved. And another thing to pay attention to as Christ is interacting with people is his use of questions. This is called the Maieutic Method, and it was one that was pioneered by Socrates, but you read about it in other places. So you have the stuffing a turkey approach, where you classes where someone gives a lecture. Now, there's a place for that. The Sermon on the Mount's a lecture, but sometimes as we're talking, we're just talking. It's an information dump, or you just like this. You can just sit here and play my video and go home and be perfectly fine with that. But the approach with teaching is that it engages people's minds, and it works really well. As you ask questions, you're opening up their framework of assumptions, what they believe, what they know, their level of understanding. And teaching is using questions is also very good for interpersonal counseling, like when you're meeting with a bishop or you're being a life coach. I'm a certified life coach too, and so when you're talking with people, you ask some questions and just let them answer and make sure these questions are healthy and appropriate and they're going somewhere. But that's one of the things that is helpful with teaching, is asking the questions. The best example we have in the scriptures is from the Book of Mormon in Alma chapter 5. In fact, President Ezra Taft Benson counseled us, or he said, do we frequently review the crucial... Let me start that again. Do we frequently review the crucial questions which Alma asks the members of the church in the fifth chapter of Alma in the Book of Mormon? Sorry if my tongue just is not working, but you think you got the point. You could read the stuff in the notes below, and I provide a link to that. And that was from the April 1987 General Conference. Plus, as you've been reading the current teaching manual, there was always counseling us to ask inspired questions. So the event, sort of the explanation, and then the question that Christ asked, that's what you're focusing on. Now, here's another thing to pay attention to, is the patterns of power. As you're reading these series of snapshots, or these quick events of Christ's life where he interacts with people, the Pharisees, and also with the apostles, is what Christ does is he teaches. And another thing he does is to exorcise devils, cast out evil spirits. He heals and he forgives. Then when you notice with the apostles, when they go out and they interact with people, they follow Christ with one exception. They teach, they cast out devils, they heal, but there's no forgiveness of sin. And that's an important thing to pay attention to, is that Christ never delegated the power to forgive sins to any mortal. That's something that only God can do. But these other things, they set a pattern for us in our ministering. Are we just showing up to meetings, or are we doing the spiritual activities? And this is really quick. We're at under 5 minutes, which is kind of how I envision this podcast. I've never been able to really achieve that. But here's the Christ quotient. This is the wrap up from everything I've said, is that Christ varied his teaching methods. He lectured, and that's planting seeds. And then he asked questions, which is to midwife ideas. In fact, like I said, Socrates used the questioning approach, and he said that he described what he was doing as being a midwife. Socrates' mother was a midwife, and he said, look, I'm doing the same thing, except not with the body, but with people's brains. I'm getting them to generate ideas, and I'm guiding them through the process of giving birth to ideas. Now, part of the problem is why do we have to lecture so much in church? Well, some people just learn by listening, and that's where you get audio tapes, things like podcasts. People just how they process things is through listening, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how you are. It's like, okay, I have blue eyes. That's just how I am. But there's some other reasons too why people why we have to lecture so much. One, people don't read beforehand. People want to freeload. People just want to cruise control through church, and that creates a problem that as you're sitting there, if you ever taught classes, sometimes these classes can be electrifying and you can go incredible places. Other times it's just walking into a room of frozen pig iron. And it depends upon what the class members are doing, what their approach is, what their attitudes are, what type of spirit they bring to the class. If they want to argue with you and be contentious, or if they're there to learn. If they read beforehand and they want to share stuff, because you're not just a teacher, you're more of an instructor, and other people in the class are also teachers, as it talks about in section 88. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Christ's crucial difference. As we're paying attention, we need to understand Christ is not just another prophet. He's just not another teacher. He's not sort of a I don't know what the analogy is. Nothing's coming to mind right now, but he's the Son of God. And you notice by what he does is that he forgives sins, as Christ says, which is easy to do. Heal the sick, raise the dead, or to forgive sins. Can you just say that? Anyone can say they forgive sins, but that's just something exclusive to God. The other thing he did is that he touched unclean people. If you remember with the law of Moses is that if you touch someone who's unclean, you in turn became unclean. But that wasn't an issue for Christ. But also, and the other thing to do is when Christ cast out evil spirits, how do the devils react when they're cast out? So those are three clues to show that Christ is a different person. He's not just another in a series of prophet, as Muslims believe, or he's not just an influential thinker or noble person. He's actually the Son of God, because those three things are only something that only the Son of God could do. And so the question for us now is, one, are we teaching? Are we healing? Are we casting out devils? Both sort of in the literal and figurative sense. What's our teaching like? Or are we just focusing on scheduling activities and a lot of sugary refreshments and calling that good? Or are you a church bench warmer? Teaching, section 50, it talks about how you teach and how the people teach and the spirit that's involved with it. But the beginning of the section is, okay, the problem that's going on there is there's all these evil spirits running around and they're affecting our people. And so we have to teach to cast out evil spirits. And that's part of the process of exorcising evil spirits. Another thing to think about is teaching, exorcising evil spirits, and healing. These are all gifts of the Spirit available to both men and women. Lastly, are we embracing Christ's dynamic lifestyle? That as you're reading, Christ is a very energetic person. Admittedly, we're not seeing him. Only in one case do we learn about Christ sleeping, and that's when he's sleeping on the ship. But he's going here and there, and occasionally he takes retreats up into the mountains. But he's a very dynamic person. Are we just going through the motions and trying to fit in with the cliques in church? Are we obtaining the spiritual power? Are we following Christ's dynamic life? And following Christ's life, well, that's the point. 8 minutes.